I have no panel today, so I'm going to do all four. Oh, sorry. Only kidding. Here we go.
It's good to see you.
Dr. Dan, Sir Marshall, Sir Claudio, Sir Athomas. By the way, this is the 50-year anniversary with Iceland. I was here when I was 19 years old. I would tell you the story, and I would tell you my age, but you're all good at math. So today, I'm so happy to be here, and I love your country more than ever. And I love your pool, too. It's amazing. Today, my esteemed panel and I will talk about two issues. We're going to talk about the pervasive and seamless integration of VR, AR, MR, immersion in general, and what will ultimately be called holography, maybe, in our lives. And secondly, we're going to talk about the cultural, psychological, anthropomorphic, etc. implications of same. I begin with the first. How many people here wear glasses? How many people here have hearing aids or any kind of audio augmentation? Okay, that's great, all of you. It turns out that those with glasses and any kind of biotechnology augmenting your life are cyborgs, if you look at the definition in Wikipedia. And imagine where we're going when, VR is great, 360 degrees, and of course, to some degree, that is augmentation, it's experiential augmentation, but imagine what happens when what comes beyond VR or in parallel, but much bigger, which is AR, and then whatever comes beyond it. And by the way, soon we won't even have these terms, VR, AR, MR, because these things will be just part of our life. So imagine when artificial intelligence, or now they're trying to call it something else, they're trying to call it augmentation because they don't want to scare us. Imagine when these things are such a pervasive and seamless part of our life that you're not even aware of the impact of the content you're experiencing, and not even aware perhaps of the people that are producing it. So that suggests then that there are implications for the same. So imagine the psychological implications of these pervasive technologies as well. And this is what I think about all the time, especially as VR becomes more and more photorealistic. So what we're doing is we're moving towards a much more pervasive integration of these technologies in our life, as with every previous digital technology for those of us in the room. I'll begin with my background. This is my 30th year in VR. My first experience was in 1986. In 1989, I designed the world's first virtual reality simulation game for family therapy and mental health as my graduate thesis. My undergraduate work was in propaganda. Believe it or not, I'll get back to that in a second. And my phone is playing tricks with me. This is what happens when it's not pervasive. And what I studied was the Soviet propagandist filmmakers, and as they wove together the Soviet Union by inventing a new kind of cinema called montage. And what cinema did, unlike the cinema that preceded it, which was single long shot, 15-minute spectacle. You watch a train coming at you, or you watch a stage play. You didn't have a suspension of disbelief. You were impressed by it, but you never identified. But what the Soviets really focused on was the fact that if you have a large screen, darkened room, you use editing to get rid of all the extra information that's not necessary for the brain and sequence significant narrative elements in a particular juxtaposition. You could trick the brain into believing this content was real. It was primary. Now, what does that mean? It means you process it if it's data. So when you see a bush in the forest, you don't question its integrity, but you would certainly question the integrity of somebody telling you a story. But they figured out how to create movies that could convince people that what they were showing were real. And that's what it is. That's the perspective by which I look at a technology or a series of technologies that are becoming ever more pervasively photorealistic and compelling. So today's conversation is with four fellows, and I apologize, I went to Berkeley. I am a liberal feminist, not a radical feminist. I'm sorry that there are no women on my panel. I apologize in advance. But I'm sensitive, and I'll do the best I can to make sure that we stay empathetic. We have four folks here that are all representing a piece of the puzzle and are all sensitive to the issues. We have Dr. Dan Cook, who's literally hacked the brain I recently was talking to one of the CEO of one of the largest VR companies in the Bay Area, and I won't say who it is. And he said, this is all great, but brain hacking is the future. And that sort of scared me because I didn't know him well enough to know what his position was on that. But Dr. Dan is a neurophysicist, neuropsychologist, has literally mapped the brain. And we'll talk to you a little bit today about what he's doing in that space and what his positions are and how this can help humanity, but also help VR. Imagine that he's already allowing people to drive with your brain video games. There's a video of his brother playing Pong with just his brain. Next to him is Claudio, who's a designer, is Italian. That says as much as the fact he's a designer. He's done an amazing amount of work in artificial intelligence, VR, gaming, and his whole focus is the human experience beyond technology. What can these technologies do to enhance our life experience? Next to him is Marshall Millett. Marshall has developed a company that I immediately thought was holography, and he said, don't use that term. That's 30 years old. By background, he's an anthropologist, spent a lot of time in nature, a very deep person who's also a mathematician and started thinking about authentic life. How could he create authentic life? And found his way into one of the, if not the most trailblazing company in the volumetric video space, which is the third wing of VR. The first being 3D, the second wing being 360, which is where it is today, and the future, which is photorealistic experiences that you can immerse and interact with. And the last is Mr. Athomas. His parents didn't want him to be last in line at lunch, so they put an A in front of his name. It's also, I'm sorry, that's me. By the way, when I speak and give speeches, I channel, I talk too fast, and it's a deceased comedian, I'm sure. So I apologize for not being funny. But Athomas is also one of the most preeminent gaming computer scientists, artificial intelligence, doing amazing work that you've all seen in some of the most compelling, high-end 3D console games out there. All four of these folks are wonderful people I've had some great time with. And our format today is going to be that each person's going to introduce themselves briefly, and then we're going to go around again. Each person's going to make 3 to 4 comments they've had some opportunity to meditate upon. And then as quickly as we can, we go into a conversation where if you don't raise your hands, but I'm sure you will, then I will ask you questions because it has to be a conversation. You don't learn otherwise. Dan.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Glad to be here with you today and glad to be in Iceland. It's my first
This is the
time.
first speech I've ever given.
David's first speech, first time I've heard him speak. Okay. And we went snowmobiling yesterday on the glacier, and that was really fun. And I want to thank Slush Play and everyone that brought us here, Chris Traub and everybody. It's been great here in Iceland, up in the north. So I'm Dan Cook. I am the founder and CEO of Brainwave VR, and we are putting brainwave sensors in your virtual reality headsets. And we're also connecting it to our brain operating system, our brainwave engine, and our facial expression engine. And so basically, by loading up the headsets with brainwave sensors, first just small numbers like 8 or 16 brainwave sensors, but in the future, it'll be thousands of brainwave sensors. It's going to be amazing. It's really the creation of the real VR of the future, the brainwave VR. And we've got the human face working pretty good, but we're trying to speed it up, get it down to 3 minutes for the self-calibration. And then you'll have social VR, brainwave social VR with live human avatar facial expressions. That'll transform Skype, WeChat, WebEx. It'll make it so you can talk face-to-face across great distances and really feel like you're there. And later we'll do emotion, brainwave emotion tracking for true, authentic human emotion detection. And then after that, brainwave cognition to pick up the actual movements of the mind, our thought processes, when we understand things, when we don't understand things. Get that human cognition tracking for ourselves and our avatars. And then after that, we'll start animating the fingers and the hands and then the whole body. So the brainwave control of the whole body is coming. Handheld controllers will only be needed for a few more years, and then we'll move beyond them. It'll be brainwave control of your full avatar. So that's what we're creating right now, and we've been working on it for many years, and we hope to get some headsets out next year, 2017, to developers. So we're excited about that.
Claudio.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the nice introduction, David. And yeah, I'm Claudio Pedica. I work at Solfar, Icelandic VR studio. I'm responsible for the user experience and interaction design. In the past, I've been working on social AI, we were like developing at Reykjavik University a technology to improve characters for interactive storytelling, and the idea was like to kind of like mimic certain like social reactions we all have concerning with gaze or personal space, to make those interactive stories more believable. And then over time I moved more towards like the new media, and I worked for a while in a design studio, Gagarin, another like design studio here in Iceland, on interactive installations for museums and public spaces. So it was more oriented toward the culture.
Thank you. Marshall?
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here with everyone as well. I couldn't do a better introduction. It's pretty incredible. But a quick, where I come from, so I was working on some complex systems in autonomous vehicles with a company called Lit Motors in San Francisco. And then my full-time gig was archaeology. And I got obsessed with 3D documentation. I was working with the Smithsonian, the National Center of Preservation Training Technologies. And what I saw was all these tool sets to create a perfect replica to actually observe the real world and bring that into a digital form. And on the 3D sensing side of vehicles, we were taking computer vision and sensors and teaching robots and machines to see. And what I wanted to do was merge those two things. How do we actually observe the world real time in a sensory, visual way into an authentic reality? So David mentioned you have CGI, you have 360, and then you have volumetric. And I think it's really critical to realize that most of our conversations about VR come from a CGI standpoint, where we're creating fiction. We get to build whatever we want, and that gets interpreted as reality. And where I stand is we want to observe the real world. We want to atomize a representation to a high detail and be able to interact and understand that. So we formed a company, AE Mass, and we work on full-scale volumetric capture, including real-time systems.
Thank you, Marshall. You guys are all doing pretty well. I secretly gave them a limit of time, and they're all kicking ass. But, sorry.
Watch your tongue. Thanks, David. As David mentioned, my focus for pretty much the better part of the last 2 decades has been on interactive character behavior, and specifically artificial intelligence and animation. And sort of in that capacity, I spent several years overseeing development of the animation systems used at Electronic Arts, and it's currently the animation system that's in Frostbite and is used across all of their games, from their sports titles to their action-adventure titles and so forth. And then over the last couple of years, I've been primarily working on doing consulting into the gaming and VR industry after completing a stint at Microsoft working on animation technology for Xbox One. And most recently, I was involved in the development of Firelands, which was one of the Oculus Rift launch titles, and have been continuing to work with Oculus on a number of sort of new experiences that are in development. And then the other part of my time has been looking at the sort of human side of that, in terms of how we actually interact, in particular when we get into VR worlds, is how we interact with those worlds. And sort of as part of that, I've been working with dancers and acrobats and puppeteers and jugglers to sort of explore the range and limits of kind of human motion and physical capability within virtual spaces. And then also the sort of expression of human motion within those spaces.
Okay, great. One thing I forgot to mention was, in my own background, my day job is I produce feature films, television, games, etc. My last movie was the Steve Jobs film. All my projects are chosen for their social impact. And in the audience is Brett Leonard, and I want to thank Brett for having more influence on my life than any other by inviting me to be the VR consultant on The Lawnmower Man 25 years ago. Speaking of influence, our opportunity to influence begins now. Dan, what have you been thinking about in terms of the psychological, cultural implications? I'm not going to use the word moral, of what we're doing and what you're doing today, and how these technologies can become increasingly part of our lives.
Yes, thank you, David. You're not going to use the word moral, but I will a little bit.
Okay,
Just
go
why
ahead.
The psychological implications are huge, especially when you start using brainwaves, because you can start really tracking what the human brain's doing. And we can ask ourselves the question, what is the greatest use of virtual reality? What would be the best use for the human beings on this planet? And one thing we could look at is how could we use the technologies we're creating right now to end world poverty and take care of those people that are not fortunate enough to be here today? That's a big question. What can we do for those people that really need our help? How can we use technology, virtual reality, and brainwave virtual reality to end world poverty and help the people on the bottom?
Do you have an answer?
I have lots of answers, but it takes us beyond the scope of this conversation.
Just give us 2 bullets.
Okay, what is a human being? If somebody in here in this room thinks they know what a human being is, I would love to talk with you, because I'm searching for the answer.
You're doing questions for answers.
That's right. That's right. And what is money? What is money? What is human money? Animals don't use money, but human beings do.
Let's get explicit here. We have folks here that are designing solutions. What are the implications of brainwave machine control?
Huge, huge. Brainwave machine control means we can use our brains and the activity of our brains to directly control the machines.
For a moment, I thought you were Trump. I said, what are the implications? It's huge.
It's huge. It's bigger than Trump, definitely bigger than Trump.
Give us some meat. These guys here are designing the most amazing games, experiences. Really, it's all just experiences. Anyway, Peter Gabriel, who I had the opportunity to work with a long time ago, again, thanks to Brett, once said to me, I'm not a musician, I'm an experience designer. And I always thought that was such a powerful thing. These are all experience designers. What does it mean to have your suite of capacity for what they're trying to do? And should they be thinking twice about what they do and what they don't do?
Yes, they should be thinking twice and even 3 times about what they do and what they don't do, because once you have access to the inner workings of the human brain, the game changes. So brainwaves will soon be streamed into computers. Computers on the head, computers in your pocket, computers that are nearby, just Bluetooth away, or 4G LTE, or 5G away, or 6G away. Big opportunities are coming. So what do you want to create? We are a worldwide community of developers. What do we want to create? What is the future we choose to create? That is a psychological question. It's a moral question, and it's a brainwave question. What is the ultimate capacity of the human brain, and what can it create? I think by asking the right questions and entering into a worldwide dialogue about what the solutions and answers might be, we're going to get somewhere, hopefully.
I use a private email server. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to offset the Trump thing. The format here is a conversation. It's not just people talking on stage. So if anybody has a burning comment, I will address that right now. My main goal is to get through the 4 of us, their 4 points, and get a conversation. Do you want to? I saw your finger. Was that a twitch or was it?
Yeah, I actually wanted to.
Go ahead,
add
please.
something to what Dan was saying, kind of from my perspective, what gets me excited about the stuff that Dan's working on. Right now, when we look at kind of our interaction models, whether it be in VR or games in particular, which is where I come out of, we're generally modeling around kind of our input devices. So if I'm going to build up a model of what a player is doing in order to have characters that respond to that, right now my tools are what buttons are they pressing in response to stimuli, what are they, how are they moving, and so forth. And so the idea that once we can identify things like the player's emotional state, and their stress level and their tension, or whether they're feeling good or bad, which is I think a lot of the promise of the brainwave VR stuff, then that becomes part of the interaction model. I can build characters that can more easily identify that the player is upset, or they're happy, or they're excited, or they're confused, and then build that into the responses of the,
So you can benchmark into their experience.
Well, I mean, it's more than that, because frequently we don't have things like, when we interact, I can look at your face, and I can see, from your body language, I can see from your expressions, how you're feeling. But, I can't necessarily determine that from, whether someone pressed X or A, or even that they kind of waved their touch controller or their, around. But as I said, the more that I can identify that, then I can create characters who can respond to you as if they are seeing that on your face, even though your face has, a VR helmet on it.
By the way, I keep on hearing that VR and AR are going to merge sufficiently so that you can have either experience or just life itself. And I just think that's important to keep in mind as well. Claudio, you got to have some thoughts on this because you're trying to create authentic experiences. And where does that bring you, from a design perspective, when you have comprehensive access to basically all of a person's stimulus or all their emotional response? And what does it make you feel also as a person that loves nature as well?
I am constantly afraid that we might have way to access to those sensorial stimuli. We might even create experiences that are a little overwhelming, and we're not used to it. And perhaps the kind of experiences that we design in VR meant to represent maybe some conceptual abstractions, right? Like a total replica of reality or super reality. So I would say that it's definitely exciting to have opportunities and have tools, but we should also try to craft them in a way that it's compatible to human nature and to what we like and what we not like without forcing it too much.
I think we also need to think very seriously about cybersecurity and basically cutting off any possible external access to this information. The Russians apparently, the Americans never were able to hack the Russian missile system because they didn't use software. It was primarily hardware-based communication, so there was no point in. Maybe we might learn from that when it comes to designing tools. Marshall, you're a person that spent a lot of time in nature, pristine nature, doing what you did before you were inspired by this, and now your goal is authenticity. Do you have any thoughts forming around this conversation that you'd like to share?
Well, I think the beautiful thing about VR and why we're all in one room together, but is one of the biggest pitfalls, is the conversation, the language about virtual reality right now. And it hinges on one word, which is reality. And when you're that big of a scope, we get this opportunity to talk about how we can map emotion and inject that into digital worlds, how that's a game, how life gets gamified, and how you're experiencing other people's places. And empathy machine comes into this. But the pitfall is this promise of VR, this philosophy of VR that is so big and overwhelming that we may be, we're not focusing on what the technology specifically means and is to us. So for me, when you talk about user experience, I think you hit it on the head as far as design around the human and where that is and where the technology fits right here. Because you can do anything in VR, but where do humans come into play? And so socially, this is going to affect us. Because everyone's talking about VR as a social wagon that we can ride, but everything is CGI, which has nothing to do with who we actually are as people. So for me, environment, the things we were born naturally doing, whether it's historically and over a massive period of time as human beings that we did do in nature, are going to be the most influential experiences.
You began your quest trying to recreate indigenous communities, indigenous culture before it was destroyed by power lines or dams.
Well, it's interesting. So 3D documentation, as far as reality capture, preservation world was the first need. The Smithsonian needed to find a way to better document an artifact before it could be destroyed or impacted in certain ways. And so that becomes pervasive to human experience. How do you archive human experience to give people real access to what it is? And for me, that's an underlying value that virtual reality should be. And it's when we move into a future world of gamification. When we imagined VR, we imagined very much a Star Trek thing. And you're on the holodeck, and you bring up 1920s New Orleans, or you bring up Einstein, and you say, Einstein, I have a problem. Let's talk through that. I believe you can't have that conversation with Einstein if 30 guys coded it as a game. You need to capture Einstein as an authentic reality of what he is, the way he talks, how he pauses before he thinks of a conversation, and then you apply that deep learning, the AI, to that real experience. And you opened the session that same way. You said, if I have a bush, we know the reality of what that bush is, or wood, and how that wood gets used. So if I show you a picture of me, you don't go, oh, that's a convincing avatar. That is me in general. So I think you need to start with that base layer of reality before virtual reality makes sense to anybody else. I mean, other than gaming, which is a massive industry, but in daily application, I think that's most significant.
Just one of the progressions that I've been observing is that there was VR 30 years ago, now there's VR again. Maybe this is the wave, or maybe it's still a few years away before it's pervasive. AR has been struggling and struggling, even though everybody in the know says it's going to be so many times bigger. Then Pokemon finally showed the beginnings of what would be the killer app or the sexy app that shows how superimposing artificial life on real life can actually be compelling. I've always seen the next wave as AI, and you can see just by this panel that it's everywhere. You're going to hear it more and more and more. And then I thought brain hacking was next. But obviously, it's all happening much quicker than we anticipate. So speaking of AI, let me jump now to Claudio. Why don't you share what you've been thinking about in preparation for this panel?
Yeah, well, definitely AI is going to have a place in our future in some way or another one. I personally don't like too much the term AI. I think it's very misleading. I prefer to call it like automation or intelligent automation. And I've always been thinking that like we should find ways to, well, if we're really thinking about automation and how to make it intelligent, my preference would be to have some automation that save us time rather than like make us more productive or like, you know, able to do more, because I don't get so much the point in that. So like something that saves us time or serves for something, it might connect with something that we talked yesterday, me and Athomas, when we address the point of VR content. There will be like a lot of content coming soon for VR, and we get access to that. And Athomas made a very important point that says, like who's going to lead like the amount of production of those content? There would be like maybe like 5 big content producers, and they will basically control everything. And I would say, why not have like an AI that filters all this stuff and give us just like what we would like to see, rather than like what they want us to see. So it might be like some interesting applications of AI, but also like an interesting point of view about that. Just not necessarily like AI controlling us, but like automation coming at our service against other people that might want to control us.
You know, I bumped into this now, calling it something else. I mean, AI has been trying to happen for a long time, and whatever AI is, the IBM people have been had a campaign around their IBM Watson program. They were calling it AI, and now they're not calling it AI anymore. Now they're calling it augmentation, because the fear is slowly but surely brewing throughout humanity that AI is ultimately our doom. And it's not the first time that I've heard that. I was at a party last July, and I met a woman who turned out was in the military intelligence world, a Chinese woman on the American team, and she asked me what my greatest fear was. And I told her, well, one of the things I've been very focused on, it's one of the movies I'm developing, on the unstoppable rise of the oceans and the rise of humanity that will be required for adaptation. And I asked, what about you? And she said, in 50 years, killer AI, mark my words. And that thought hasn't left me yet. So I have a feeling we're going to be hearing the terms AI less and less as it becomes more and more pervasive. Marshall, what are the thoughts you've been brewing together as you prepared for today?
Well, one thing we discussed was ethics and morality, where we're going. And then I said, well, maybe morality is not exactly the first thing to talk about, in that we're going to create new senses of being and new selves into these virtual environments. And I think culturally, morals end up building from those interactions as people. And so it's hard to know morally what's right when you want this to be something that really changes who we are as people in this conversation of who we are as people. And maybe it can bring us into basically a next state of intelligence or access to it. I mean, when I imagine recording experiences and being able to bring myself into what everyone else has actually experienced as people, the knowledge and the education and the discovery of learning that so fast gives me an advantage that nobody else had even the 10 years prior, even with phones and Wikipedia and what internet is. We're going to move into an experience-based economy. And I think the tools and what we should do or should not do, we need to be very cognizant and thinking about it, but also not limit what that's going to be.
My conversation with Marshall a couple days ago was exactly around the notion of bringing morality or ethics into the conversation. And it was very powerful for me to reflect on that over the last few days, and I was grateful for that. And I really believe that all of us need the opportunity to excel at what we do, to manifest our greatest creativity, to be highly competitive in any business, whether it's the gaming business or the technology business, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, I think about the folks that invented the nuclear bomb. They weren't thinking so much about the moral issues because they weren't even sure if this would work. They wanted to see if they could make it work in the first place. And it was other people that would use it or abuse it. And, you know, I see all these trajectories going on in the entertainment world that really have no awareness. Every time I see somebody smoking in a film, I think about my 9-year-old and wonder how I'm going to protect him from feeling compelled to smoke because he sees attractive human beings smoking. I mean, my focus, because I've awoken to this particular place in life, I believe I'm on the planet to produce mass media entertainment technology, films, television, et cetera, games, that, and in the end, entertain people, but also inspire them to learn more about themselves and somehow come closer to who they really are and what their gift is. Because I believe all of us ultimately have a piece of the puzzle on the planet, but none of us are taught this. I went into mental health education through media not because it was my lifelong dream, but because as a young person I discovered there was no mental health education in schools anywhere in the world for the most part. I mean, that may not be fully true. Aboriginal, indigenous tribes, there are certain types of education, but kids are not taught that they're intelligent or their dreams are valuable or why they feel compelled to drink or smoke or join gangs or worse. They don't know what's going on in their bodies, and how can you expect young people to learn if they don't have some psychological or mental health literacy? So that's what started my path 35 years ago, and it's why I started studying the Soviets. And it was interesting that I was giving a speech in Estonia about a year ago, and I sat with a couple very troubled European Union executive officers, who were using the term soft power and talking about how in addition to bullets, there's media, there's soft power. They were trying to figure out how to stop Paris from happening again. This is before Belgium happened. And so people are starting to think more and more in terms of how you use media and how you inspire it. And I said, well, why don't you finance content that is soft power in addition to just artistic content of artistic merit? And they weren't sure about that. So there's all these moral issues. Go on, Marshall.
I think this ties in. I just came from Digitally, which is in Germany, and Photokina, which is a conference that's 10, 15 years old, and they're addressing VR for the first time. And hearing everyone talk here in Iceland, my question is, hearing Iceland say, we want Iceland to be synonymous with VR, to be pervasive. And so here right now we're talking mostly about video games. And so a question I have for the audience right here, right now is, what else are you doing to expand what that technology is? Because are we replicating what the industry has already led with, you know, Oculus being a 90% video game platform with some 360, but then where it is after that. You know, question same with Sony PlayStation, very clearly a video game play. So the bigger conversation everyone has is about what VR can mean as experience, but you know, what are we actually doing to build technology in different directions? And I mentioned Digitally because the same question came up as far as representing real experiences, and that seemed to be the main design function that people are after. I can empathize with people into these other rooms as designed experiences, but where does VR fit other than gamification? Is there anything else that it does?
This conversation that I had with Chelsea last night, imagine empathic immersion. I've heard that there's an X Prize on empathic computing that's floating around. I think this is a conversation that's going around the globe. And think about China. I was recently in Beijing at a VR accelerator there. VR in China is going to be many times bigger than it is anywhere else in the world, not only because they're so quick to adopt, but because they don't have a lot of options over there, and the government is behind it, and there's so much money over there. But imagine, the possibilities of using computing to facilitate humanness. I don't want to speak too much, though. Claudio, Athomas, sorry. Share your thoughts, if you don't mind, that you had prepared for today. Just a few points.
Yeah, so Marshall keeps looking at me every time he says gamification.
Not in a mean way.
I'm
I'm not that anti-game.
Yeah.
I'm just very reality, that's all.
And the secret is I'm not that pro-game, so. But what I am, so I think that just to, in the broader context, I think the principal ways in which we, culture is transmitted from generation to generation and between cultures is, through the stories that we tell each other and through the games that we play together. And I mean game in the broadest sense, so it's not just, specifically competitive things, but it does include those, whether it's, whether we're playing soccer or Call of Duty or chess or what have you. These are the ways we transmit culture. And as we get into these domains like games and VR and so forth, where the technological requirements for creating this this kind of media become higher and higher, it becomes more and more critical that that we focus on and give attention to the tools that are used in the creation of this media. And this is something that it's been kind of a big sort of major part of the work that I've done over the last 20 years is really been about looking at who are the content creators for the different types of content that go into this media, and whether or not the tools are really designed for them. Because I found that if creating content, creating interactive characters that are emotionally engaging requires significant engineering effort to solve, if it's an engineering problem, what you end up with are engineered solutions. And so, a lot of what we need to do while we're developing all these cool technologies is really be thinking very carefully about, how the artist and the writer and the designer, how they engage with that media in order to create, people who are focused on emotional engagement. Do they have the tools in order to create emotionally engaging characters and media? So.
Speaking about emotions, 5 is my favorite number. I was just told that I'm 5 years old. 5 minutes. So I want to now go into the audience section. Let me begin very briefly with just a Google News item that I wrote 6 months ago, which blew me away. I'm going to ask questions now. Maybe I'll ask for a little bit of light just so that I can see the hands. There was an article on Google that caught my eye that said, question, is there other intelligent life in the universe? Answer, there have been thousands of intelligent species, and they're all gone. And the concept of the article was that there have been at least 1,000 or more planets that came together with the stuff of life, and the Darwinian ascent to intelligence and indigenous beings came to the point where for a couple 100,000 years, there were indigenous beings, and then they learned how to transact the environment. And then the game of life was clicking. Can they transact the oxygen or whatever chemical they used and create homeostasis and sustain themselves? And I believe that that's the ultimate video game of humanity right now, is can we create sustainability in our environment? In the context of that question, let me see some hands, some questions for the panel.
Actually, it's not a question, it's a response. You're asking about tools for artists, storytelling, that's the whole point.
Can you speak up, please?
I'm giving a talk at 4:10 this afternoon about creating tools for storytellers that are not specialist coders for VR.
So what's the role for storytellers that are not coders? Did I get it right?
Yes.
Good.
Well, just say that's my talk at 4:10, so please.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we don't want to give your talk. Okay, come to his talk.
10 past 4.
Okay, questions, because I want to go fast here. I want to get as many questions as I can. You're either stretching or you have a question. Come up with a question. Okay, you had your chance. Go ahead.
There was a Brandon Uribe quote earlier about VR become potentially human vision. Kind of with some of the expertise on the brain and some of the things they were talking about capturing kind of real life with VR or AR. Can you guys maybe talk about that idea of in a cyborg sense, are we going to replace our vision with something like VR, AR?
Yes, definitely. So I think, because this is something I directed and thought about very extensively, because computer vision, OpenCV, the tools that most of the coders are using to do the type of work that we do, was built for robots. And that was its purpose. And flipping that inside out will dynamically change everything that we're doing and we're conceiving. Because, so volumetric, a year ago I was having a conversation and it was military interest. Because if you can see everything from every angle in a volumetric way, the user gets to turn that view, zoom in, zoom out. And he didn't call it VR, he called it the eye of God. And this capacity to think at this level of information, of real-time space, and how powerful that is for people will change the way that we see. So I think absolutely that's going to affect us.
Dan, do you have anything to say about computer vision, which is more, arguably far more pristine than human vision, becoming our default perception?
Yeah, computer vision is going to get very powerful, but the most wonderful thing is human vision and human understanding of what we're looking at. So computers, they're going to have a hard time fully understanding and fully being aware, because computers are not aware, but human beings are aware.
I would like a question from please. I want a question from a woman too, but you look sensitive. Go ahead.
Regarding the brainwave VR, have you ever thought going the other way? So the game would influence the brain, so you could actually feel what you are experiencing in the virtual world.
Yes, that question's about going the other way, feeding information directly into the brain from the game, and that's coming too. So first we just listen to the brain, but later we directly stimulate and bypass the human body. So the human body will become optional in the future, but the brain will stay important for a long time.
Really quick, David, so actually drugs are a major component of how we view reality, and people have looked into this. Tim Leary, 1990s NYC, when they opened virtual reality and talked about this, he said virtual reality is finally a way people can understand how I'm talking about influences on the brain. And there are people starting to address that as drugs and biotech advance. So what if you can lose headsets because you're directly influencing the way we see the world?
I want one last question from you. I need a female participation here, please. This is our last question.
I don't have a question. I just had associations, and one of them was Strange Days, the movie.
Okay. One last question, please, from a woman. Thank you.
I was just wondering, in terms of your sort of brain hacking analysis and everything like that, if you haven't talked about, well, you're not cybersecurity, but cerebral security.
Interesting.
One thing, if everybody knows what you're doing, people start sort of really knowing how you're feeling, what you're thinking, and thoughts on that.
Yes, lots of thoughts on that. And cerebral security is going to become more important than cybersecurity in the future, although cybersecurity is very important. So cerebral security, some people want to have their brainwaves read and have other people know about it, but many people don't. Many people want to have their brainwaves private, their thoughts private, their emotions private. Some people just put everything that, pictures themselves and their family on Facebook. They're happy to share their lives with the world. So all that will need to be worked out as we move through the next few years.
I close our panel today with a quote that led my thesis, which was from Gerald Nachman. He said, "Technology is neither good nor evil. It depends on how you use it." Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.